A lot of the conflicts that couples have comes down to a perpetual decision that they're each trying to make. It's the decision of how much they should cooperate toward shared goals and how much they should do their own thing and pursue separate goals. On the surface, the conflict often looks darker and more malignant. Something like selfishness, stubbornness, sabotage, a defensive refusal to listen or to be honest. Basically some form of badness or madness. So going beneath the surface to this cooperation question can make the conflict less threatening and thus more answerable. No one's bad or mad, we're just indecisive as a unit, even if as individuals we very much know what we want. There's a metaphor from game theory called the stag hunt, which I think can give an anxiety-reducing view of the root cause of many, sometimes most, of a couple's arguments. The stag hunt is a metaphor for understanding why shared goals can be so elusive and why communication can abruptly end or go sideways. It's a social pattern about the benefits of mutual cooperation and the danger of unrequited cooperation. Picture two people in the same forest, both hungry. One's tracking a rabbit, the other a stag. But neither of them made their full plans or the help they need known to the other. Maybe one thinks they're cooperating and the other thinks they're hunting solo. So they spend the whole day crossing each other's paths, spooking all the game, and waiting for help they expected but that was never known to the other. They didn't cooperate to hunt the same large animal or consciously decide that they'd each do this one alone. Attempts to mind read failed and false assumptions were made, and rather than catch anything, they actually found themselves being caught by a case of mutual disappointment and frustration. While the activities and outcomes are different, this is essentially the same social transactional pattern, sometimes called a game, that brings many couples to therapy. The stag hunt involves a few simple assumptions. Number one, it's impossible to catch a stag by yourself, but doable with help if you work together and collaborate. Number two, catching a rabbit is achievable by yourself. And number three, catching a stag together is much better than catching a rabbit on your own, since a stag is an order of magnitude bigger. The incentives of the pattern or game are clear. If you're on your own, you should aim for the small goal of catching a rabbit so that you can get something, albeit small, to eat. But if you have a solid relationship with someone who you can depend on and a shared goal, then you can put your skills, resources, and efforts together and go for something much bigger than you could each get on your own, the big prize of the stag. Much of the time when couples are arguing, they're arguing about what they're doing. What is their shared goal? What are they hunting for? What are they trying to accomplish? For example, think of arguments regarding money. One wants to spend on new things now, and the other wants to save for something else later, or simply have it for security, for the unknown and unpredictable expenses. In other words, they're shooting at different targets, working at cross purposes. The relationship foot is on the gas and brake pedals at the same time. One side spends the money and the other loses their sense of security, or one side hoards money for security and the other misses out on the experiences they long for that money could have bought. In the traditional stag hunt from game theory, there are 4 outcomes. Number 1, both hunt the same stag and both receive a large payoff. Number 2, one tries to hunt the stag and the other a rabbit, or number 3, the other way around. And in either case, one gets a small payoff of the rabbit and the other gets nothing because they don't catch the stag by themselves. And number 4, both try to catch a rabbit and both get a small payoff. This is what the 4 outcomes look like in a 2x2 matrix. Here, the numbers 10, 2, and 0 represent the big payoff of the stag, the small payoff of the rabbit, and no payoff of not catching anything. I'll give an example for each outcome applied to intimate couples. Outcome 1, when both hunt the same stag. Imagine a couple who wants to buy a house. At first, they're not aligned. One pictures a small place paid off free and clear, the other a bigger house in the right school district with a 30-year mortgage. But they keep communicating productively, and instead of fighting after every open house, they find the overlap. A modest home in a decent district with a practical enough monthly payment bought together. Neither could have done it alone, on their own income, or their own nerve. That cooperation led to their stag. They achieved a large goal that the partnership made possible. A successful stag hunt is an example of synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. 1 + 1 is not equal to 2, but might equal 10 in terms of results. Outcomes 2 and 3. One hunts the stag, the other a rabbit. Here, let's say the game both are interested in is interpersonal connection, but one partner keeps reaching for deep, one-on-one bonding, presence, eye contact, shared secrets and stories, and heart-to-heart resonance. They keep setting up the big hunt, but the other partner drifts off, not ready to get that close. They go for smaller solo catches, watching TV in parallel, phone scrolling through parasocial relationships, and making small talk with the restaurant server. That isn't necessarily wrong, but they're not on the same hunt. The one investing their energy into stalking the stag comes home empty-handed, while the other one subsists on their rabbit of shallower but safe connection. Outcome 4, both settle for rabbits. Sometimes both partners give up on the big shared goal. Consider a couple's social life. He has his poker night and she has her book club, and they've stopped doing social things together. So each hunts a small, reliable rabbit alone. No one's miserable, but they do get less time together because they can't agree on a satisfying way to interface with the rest of society together. Sometimes it's just fine to be in a relationship and hunt rabbits separately. More on that later. But sometimes it can mean that they're not ideal hunting partners. 3 ways to catch nothing. I think there are more than 4 outcomes in the real, messy, and nuanced world of love and relationship. As a couples therapist, I've noted 3 other outcomes in addition to the standard 4, and they get progressively worse. Outcome 5 is the hollow catch. This hunt looks like a win-win initially and from the outside. The couple agrees, they go after the same stag and they catch it, but one partner never really wanted it and they gave in to avoid the hard conversations about their real conflicting needs. Take a couple deciding whether to move closer to one partner's aging parents or grandparents. One wants to go and the other would rather stay near their own career and friends and not be uprooted, but doesn't feel they have the standing to say no to family duty. So they agree and move. For a while, from the outside, it looks like a 10-10 on the matrix. Same stag, hunt successful. But the meat slowly rotted, especially for one of them. The partner who capitulated wasn't actually at a 10 the day they agreed. Maybe a 7, since they were going along under pressure, or due to conflict avoidance. And that number keeps dropping as they watch their new location harden into their actual life, and their resentment compounds. Meanwhile, the partner who genuinely wanted the stag doesn't necessarily stay at 10, because watching someone they love grow increasingly unhappy costs them something too, and their 10 might erode to a 5. Outcome 6, hunting different stags. Here, both partners think they're hunting the same stag, but they're actually working toward different large goals, and so they don't cooperate, and they both catch nothing. Say that they both think that they're after the stag of taking more vacations together, only they have different thought bubbles over their heads when they think about vacation. One of them imagines sipping margaritas at the Mandalay Bay in Vegas, chatting up strangers in a crowded pool. The other one wants to go to a hippie Buddhist retreat with vegetarian food and lots of chanting mantras and silent walking. Let's say they do one of each, and in both experiences, one of them is miserable, and so the other one doesn't really have a good time either. There were 2 different stags, enjoying 2 different vacations together, and they both got away. Both of them thought they were on the same hunt until they spotted their stag and realized the other was nowhere to be found. Outcome number 7, the hunt never happens at all. This outcome is when most of the couple's time is spent arguing about which stag to hunt. Take a couple who can't stop fighting about the family purpose and structure. One wants the parent-child bond to be the centerpiece of the family. The other wants the couple's relationship to be the foundation, with the kids coming second to the marriage and learning to support each other as siblings. Neither partner budges, and the fundamental disagreement never resolves. It manifests at every bedtime and every discipline decision, until each is convinced that the other is simply in the wrong when it comes to what family should really mean. Not agreeing on the hunt could be a consequence of emotional wounding and defenses that result in reactive and destructive communication, but it could also simply be a symptom of innate incompatibility. In my 3-part video series called 3 Pillars of a Nourishing Relationship, I talk at length about how to know the difference between these root causes of an inability to cooperate. This outcome, probably the worst of all, is anti-synergy, the situation where 1 + 1 yields a negative number like -1 or -5. Sometimes, if the fights are destructive enough, the sum could be -100. There is virtually no limit to the downside in unproductive conflict. Instead of catching a rabbit or stag, or even just doing nothing, all their energy goes into tearing each other down with blame and shame. Basically meta-communicating to each other, "You're a bad partner because you don't help me get what I want." This is an escalating negative cycle in which both partners feel attacked, accused, shamed, unworthy, and generally beaten down. They share the same incorrect diagnosis of the problem, that one of them is the bad guy, the defective one, the villain. But the real deeper issue is that they just don't agree on a shared goal. In all of the previous examples, there was nothing morally or inherently wrong with what any of the partners wanted. They were just preferences. Having conversations about where to invest your shared, limited energy can be very challenging because you both want what you want. And while I have my preferences and you have yours, it's not very productive to judge how someone else wants to spend their life, especially your partner if you think about it. The question is, can you find enough shared goals and pursuits so that you can share time, space, and connection happily enough? As Hamlet might have said, to cooperate or not to cooperate, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the wood to bear the safe scraps and hunger of the meager rabbit, or to take arms against a herd of stags, and by collaborating, catch one. A relationship doesn't fail because partners have some different goals. It fails when there's not enough shared goals, or sometimes when a non-negotiable life goal is not shared. For some people, non-negotiable stag hunts could include the mutually exclusive goals of having kids versus remaining child-free, or living in a dense urban area versus a remote rural one. The stag hunt is simply a metaphor, and it could apply to the entire relationship, the big stag hunt in this case being together successfully, and the separate rabbit hunts represent breaking up and being single again. If the big stag hunt is the relationship, then successfully catching the stag is something like consistently enjoying intimacy or shared happiness or simply love. But more often, I apply the stag hunt metaphor to specific goals within a couple's relationship, especially when the goals are unclear, incorrectly intuited, and not fully discussed or known to each other. It's okay for couples to sometimes hunt a stag together and sometimes hunt rabbits separately as long as there's enough shared hunting to make the relationship make sense. They can have separate hobbies and do different activities, keep separate bank accounts. I think even practice different religions or parent their kids somewhat differently if they're both able to accept and respect each other's ways of being in the world. But it's not avoidance that will lead to sound hunting plans together or separately. It's thorough, curious, open-minded, and sometimes courageous communication. Every rabbit hunter for himself. When one or both partners gives up and shuts down the conversation, and this can happen in many different ways, it essentially communicates, we are not going to agree on a stag to hunt together. This group collaborative hunt thing is just not going to work. I'm going to hunt my game and you can either help me or not, but I'm done planning hunts with you. Shutting down communication isn't always walking away. It can also look like unproductive battling, staying in contact but being overly dominant, controlling, and dismissive of the other person's perspective. A my way or the highway attitude that's disguised as trying to communicate. Either way, the shift to communication breakdown generally causes both people to withdraw and retreat into their own separate goals and agendas. They each go off and hunt small game like rabbits alone, which is quite sad when you're in a relationship. What's a relationship for if both partners are unnecessarily and too frequently limited to their own individual capacities? The tragedy is that both people are being rational in this situation. It doesn't make sense to try to hunt a stag with someone who's hunting a different animal because you're just not going to catch anything on your own. The stag is just too fast. You're better off just hunting like a single person. Usually, in my experience, if a couple has been together for a long time, they can agree on enough shared goals. But the uncomfortable uncertainty of thoroughly discussing those yet undefined goals causes them to walk away from hurt and frustration before they've understood each other. So they miss many opportunities for mutually acceptable stag hunts because the work to reach that agreement is painful and unsettling. Hunting for decisiveness. So what do I think couples should do when they've given up on productively and non-reactively talking about what they're hunting? The short version of the answer is remarkably similar to my answer to most relational and emotional problems. And that answer is to stay with it even though it's uncomfortable. Bailing out of communication with your partner, or dominating and pushing for control out of anxiety before genuine agreement is reached, or before you agree that separate hunts are in order, is an example of what I call experiential avoidance. It's an eject button from our emotions. It's essentially saying, these feelings are too hard due to this conversation, and I don't want to feel them, so I'm going to escape from them by ending the dialogue or just not being open to you. Good solutions are downstream from understanding. The first crucial step is to recognize that the urge to give up or to overpower the other is an attempt to regulate your nervous system, which has become dysregulated by the discomfort of uncertainty, the ambiguity of not yet having a solution, and the deeper subconscious fear that the solution for this hunt is to hunt rabbits alone, which in fact it might be. And again, more rabbit hunting separately may or may not be a deal breaker. It might simply mean that you stay together happily enough, but agree to operate more independently in certain areas of life. Win-win or no deal. The stag hunt and its different outcomes map onto the fourth of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Unifying and agreeing on a stag to hunt together is what Covey would have called a win-win. He cautioned against going for a lose-win or a win-lose. For example, when one partner capitulates and just hunts the game the other wants, but then feels resentful later. Since win-win is not always possible, the way to avoid lose-win or win-lose is to go for a no deal. A no deal applied to the stag hunt is to hunt smaller game separately when the large game can't be agreed on. He stays home while she travels, for example, rather than him going or her staying, and then one of them feeling deprived or resentful. The worst outcome is lose-lose, and earlier I described 2 variations of lose-lose in the stag hunt pattern: endlessly arguing about what to hunt, or hunting different stags and catching nothing. There's a good case to be made that in couples relationships, every win-lose or lose-win eventually becomes a lose-lose over time, because when one partner loses due to the relationship, it erodes their mutual bond. This becomes, in effect, a lose for the one who initially seems to win, because now the winner's secure attachment with their partner is compromised. That's solid motivation for avoiding any outcome in which either partner loses, which is why the option of no deal is absolutely crucial to be aware of. When we're kids, no deal isn't generally an option because we depend on our parents and family for survival. So we often grow up with a template that we should in fact try to win, even if it means someone else in the family loses when we can't see or find a win-win. And as the less powerful family members, children often end up being the ones who lose in transactions, which normalizes the core belief that in families, someone needs to lose and I should really try to not be that person. I think this core belief underlies a lot of subconscious dishonesty, deception, and manipulation that can happen in relationships and families. Since no deal is simply not in anyone's wheelhouse, the family can sadly become a mutually strategic arena in which everyone tries to win in a zero-sum game, but no one's ever foolish enough to point out this painful culture which exists in order to elevate survival together over happiness apart. These relational patterns, learned in childhood, can compassionately be seen as survival skills or adaptive strategies. But as free, autonomous adults, they tend to poison our relationships and, by extension, our lives. That's out of the scope of this already long video, but it's worth noting that maturity and escaping from codependence could be seen as the transition from relationships that don't include the no-deal option to relationships that do include it. Taking hunting breaks. It's okay to take breaks from dialogue if you're feeling flooded. If it's too much emotion, tell your partner you need a break, but that you do want to get back to the conversation. Usually that's enough to reassure someone when they're not ready for a break. But don't push it off in perpetuity, because the problem is not going anywhere and it will fester if you let it sit too long. Come back to it, Ask your partner if there's a time and a place when they would be open to continuing the discussion. Pick it back up right then and there, or set a time with them. And it helps while you're taking a break if you do some self-reflection rather than compartmentalizing the issue outside of your consciousness. Go on walks, journal, think, and feel the emotions in your body that arise when you ask yourself what you're actually afraid of and what you really want. Then ask yourself what your partner is actually afraid of and what they really want. Then ask the question, what are creative solutions that could satisfy both of us enough? If you're the person who really wants to talk things out more than the other, in general, respect the other person's need for breaks. Forcing dialogue when the other party isn't open to it is an example of a win-lose, which then quickly turns into a lose-lose. You could even suggest a break yourself if you think they're feeling saturated or flooded. And then you can do your own self-reflecting, the same techniques as just mentioned when they're not available to talk about it. Checking the map. You can also try pointing out the stag hunt dynamic. You can say something like, I think we're getting into blame and shame and we're looking for the bad guy, the one who's wrong, and there just isn't one. We both just have different preferences, different needs, and different ways of walking in the world. Let's stop pointing the blame and shame guns at each other and solve the real problem, which is that right now we're struggling to find common ground for investing our time and energy and resources into the same goals so that we can enjoy life together. That's a mouthful, but you can find your own authentic way of saying it. What is the stag that most couples are really after? I would say it's often the stag called enjoying intimacy. It's just that they often disagree on what that stag looks like, where it is in the forest, and how to catch it. If you can go into conversations with your partner with the intention of identifying a clear and shared goal rather than finding the one who's fundamentally wrong for having their genuine preferences, it's often enough to help you both let your guard down. Let your map and compass be empathy and curiosity as you draw out your creative hunting plans for the shared bigger goal, or as you find resolution and peace of mind from the realization that pursuing separate goals in this instance is the best option for both of you. Either way, the hunt is on.